The room was quiet, so quiet that every sound from outside felt louder than usual. A gentle hum of traffic floated in, mixed with the soft rustle of leaves swaying against the window. 3 people sat together in that silence: Keanu Reeves, Ana de Armas, and Sydney Sweeney. None of them spoke. Their eyes met every now and then, but the words stayed locked inside. It was the kind of silence that made the air heavy, yet strangely comforting. No one wanted to break it too soon, as if something powerful lived inside that stillness. Keanu leaned slightly forward in his chair, his hands folded gently. His face carried lines of experience, not just of age, but of stories untold. There was kindness in his eyes, the kind that could calm anyone sitting near him. Ana sat on his right, her posture straight, but her mind restless. She was remembering her struggles, the years of rejection, the nights when she doubted her place in the world. The silence reminded her of those moments, but it also gave her strength. She looked at Keanu, hoping to draw courage from his calm presence. Across from them sat Sydney, much younger, her eyes bright but filled with questions she had not yet dared to ask. She felt she was standing at the beginning of her journey, unsure which path to follow. The silence felt heavy, but it was not empty. It was a silence that carried meaning, one that invited reflection. For Keanu, it was a memory of times when words were not enough, when silence itself was a friend that healed pain. For Ana, it was a reminder that sometimes the greatest comfort came not from speaking, but from knowing someone was beside her. For Sydney, it was a lesson she was only beginning to understand, that silence can inspire deeper than any speech. Suddenly, a sound outside startled them. A child's laughter echoed through the open window. The 3 of them turned their heads at the same moment, and a smile slowly spread across their faces. It was as if that laughter had entered the room to remind them why they were here. The silence was not an absence. It was a bridge, connecting them to something greater, the shared human experience of struggle, hope, and resilience. Keanu finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "Silence is not empty," he said, pausing to let the words settle. "It is full of answers." The room grew still again, but this time the silence felt lighter, like a gentle breeze carrying wisdom. Ana's eyes softened as she thought about her childhood, the struggles her family faced, and how often silence had been her only companion. She whispered, almost to herself, "It is in silence that I found my strength." Sydney listened, her heart racing. She felt she was witnessing something rare. 2 people sharing truths that could not be written in scripts or captured on a screen. The silence returned, but now it carried a new power. It was no longer heavy with questions. It was alive with inspiration. Each of them felt it. Keanu leaned back and closed his eyes, letting the stillness wrap around him like a blanket. Ana reached for her glass of water, her hands steady, her breath calm. Sydney placed her hands on her knees, her mind racing with the realization that silence could teach her more than any classroom. Outside, the laughter of the child faded, replaced by the sound of wind moving gently across the street. The world seemed to be in rhythm with their silence, as if the universe itself understood what was happening in that small room. None of them needed to explain. None of them needed to fill the space with unnecessary words. The silence spoke louder than any speech. It spoke of respect, of humility, of resilience, of kindness. It reminded them that in a world filled with noise, true inspiration is often born in quiet moments. Ana turned to Sydney and gave a small smile, the kind that held unspoken encouragement. Sydney felt her chest tighten, not with fear, but with a growing sense of hope. She understood now that silence was not a weakness. It was a strength. Keanu's presence confirmed it. Ana's smile sealed it, and her own heart finally believed it. As the evening light began to fade, the silence deepened once more. This time, it was not the silence of hesitation, but of unity. The three of them sat together, bound not by words, but by understanding. None of them could have guessed that this silence would turn into a story that would inspire many, a story that would show how moments without words could shape lives forever. The next morning arrived with a soft glow of sunlight slipping through the curtains. Keanu was the first to rise. He walked slowly toward the window, watching the city outside wake up. People moved along the streets, cars passed, and somewhere in the distance a bell rang. He stood quietly, letting the sight remind him of how small moments build into life's bigger meaning. The silence from the night before still lived in him. He could feel its weight, not as a burden, but as a gift. Anna joined him a few minutes later. She carried a cup of tea in her hands, the steam rising gently into the air. She noticed Keanu's stillness, and it calmed her restless thoughts. She remembered the years when she had no clear path, when she lived with doubt about whether she could belong in a world that judged her so quickly. Now, standing beside Keanu, she felt the strange comfort of knowing she was not alone in those feelings. She placed the cup on the table and whispered, "It is strange how silence can heal what words could not." Keanu turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "Sometimes, silence is the only way we listen to ourselves," he replied. His voice carried warmth, but also a trace of sadness. Anna heard it, and it made her pause. She wanted to ask what memories weighed behind those words, but she chose not to. She respected the silence that lingered between them. A few moments later, Sydney walked into the room. Her steps were unsure, but her eyes were full of curiosity. She looked at them both, sensing something unspoken. "Last night," she began softly, "I felt something I never felt before. It was like the silence was speaking to me. I did not know silence could be that strong." Anna smiled and nodded. "It teaches you things without noise," she said. "When I was younger, I used to sit by myself and wonder if I was lost. But in the quiet, I always found a small voice inside, telling me to keep going." Sydney thought about those words. She often filled her days with endless noise, music, conversations, constant distractions, afraid of facing the quiet. Now she realized she had been running from something important. "Maybe I was afraid of silence," she admitted. "Maybe I thought it meant being alone." Keanu stepped closer, his eyes kind yet steady. "Silence is not the end of connection," he said gently. "Sometimes it is the beginning of it. The people who can share silence with you, they are the ones who really understand you." His words sank deep into Sydney's heart. She had always wanted to be understood, but she rarely thought that understanding could come without words. As they sat together, the air between them grew lighter. The silence was still there, but it was no longer a mystery. It was a bond. Still, their hearts carried memories and stories waiting to be told. Anna finally decided to speak about hers. "There were nights when I had nothing," she confessed. "I felt invisible, like my voice would never matter. But silence reminded me that I was still alive, still breathing. That was enough to keep moving forward." Sydney's eyes watered as she listened. She had never thought of silence as something that could protect or guide. She realized now that it had power, even more than noise. She leaned forward and asked, "So, silence is not weakness?" "No," Anna replied softly. "Silence is strength." For a long time they said nothing more. The sunlight grew brighter, filling the room with golden warmth. The world outside kept moving, but inside, time seemed to slow. The silence between them now carried trust. It was fragile, yet unbreakable. Then, unexpectedly, Keanu's phone rang. The sharp sound cut through the stillness like a stone thrown into calm water. He looked at the screen and his face shifted. The call was from someone he had not spoken to in years. He hesitated, unsure if he should answer. Anna and Sydney noticed his unease. "Do you want to take it?" Anna asked carefully. Keanu stared at the phone, then let it ring until it stopped. "Some voices," he said quietly, "can disturb the silence more than heal it." His words carried pain, and for the first time, Sydney saw a shadow in his calm. She realized silence could hold not only peace, but also secrets. Anna placed a hand gently on his arm. "Silence can also help us face what we fear," she said. "When the time is right, maybe you will answer." Keanu nodded slowly. He did not reply, but inside he knew her words carried truth. The silence had brought them together, but it was also testing them. It was teaching them not just peace, but courage. The night returned, and the city outside their window glowed with soft lights. Cars moved like streams of fireflies, and the sound of distant chatter floated up from the street. Inside the room, Keanu, Anna, and Sydney sat together once more. The silence was still present, but tonight it felt different. It was no longer only about peace. It carried questions, heavy and weighting. Sydney could not hold her curiosity any longer. She looked at Keanu, her voice trembling but brave. "Who was calling you today?" she asked. "You seemed unsettled." Keanu's face grew still. He lowered his eyes, his hands resting on his knees. For a long moment he said nothing. The silence stretched between them, heavier than before. Then finally he spoke. "It was someone from my past. Someone who once broke my trust." Anna leaned closer, her voice soft. "Someone close to you?" Keanu nodded. "Someone I thought would never leave. But they did. They left when I needed them most. Since then, I never answered their calls. Today was the first time they reached me again." His words hung in the air, sharp but fragile. Sydney felt her chest tighten. She had imagined Keanu as unshakable, yet here he was, sharing his wound. It made him more human, more real. "Did you want to answer?" she asked carefully. Keanu closed his eyes. "Part of me did, but another part of me feared the silence between us would break into something painful." Anna placed her hand gently on his. "Sometimes silence must end for healing to begin," she said, "but only when you are ready." Her words struck Sydney deeply. She thought about her own life, the people she avoided, the conversations she feared. Silence had protected her, but it had also kept her from healing certain scars. They sat quietly again, each lost in thought. Then, a sudden knock echoed at the door, sharp, unexpected, and urgent. All three turned at once. The silence broke into suspense. Sydney whispered, "Who could that be at this hour?" Keanu rose slowly, his steps cautious. He opened the door, and to his shock, there stood a man he had not seen in decades. His hair was grayer now, his shoulders heavier with time, but his eyes carried the same memory Keanu had buried long ago. The man spoke softly. "Keanu, I need to talk." Anna and Sydney exchanged glances, their hearts racing. They could feel the tension. The silence that once felt safe now turned into a storm. Keanu did not move, his hand still gripping the door. "You came here?" Keanu finally asked, his voice low but firm. "I had no choice," the man replied. "The silence between us has gone on too long. I cannot carry it anymore." Anna felt the air grow heavy. She looked at Keanu, then at Sydney. This was the moment silence had been leading them toward, not comfort, but confrontation. Keanu stepped aside slowly, allowing the man to enter. The room, once a place of peace, now held a tension so sharp it could almost be touched. Sydney sat up straighter, unsure what to do, but her eyes remained fixed on Keanu. The man stood in the center of the room, his voice trembling. "I left you when you needed me. I was afraid. I was weak. I stayed silent because I thought words could not fix what I broke. But silence became heavier than guilt. I had to come." Keanu's face tightened. His silence now was not peaceful. It was battle. Every second of quiet was filled with old pain rising to the surface. Anna's voice cut through gently. "Maybe this silence is not here to hurt you both. Maybe it is here to help you forgive." Keanu turned his head slightly, her words pulling at him. He had lived with silence for years, but now he saw it in a new form. Not comfort, not wisdom, but a chance to let go. Still, he hesitated. The silence stretched again, this time trembling with the weight of choice. The man's words hung in the air like smoke that would not fade. The silence that followed was not calm, not healing. It was sharp, filled with years of distance and unanswered questions. Keanu stood still, his eyes fixed on the floor. His breathing was steady, but inside him, memories rose like waves crashing against old walls. Anna felt the tension pressing into her chest. She wanted to say something that could soften the moment, but she knew this silence did not belong to her. It belonged to Keanu and the man who carried his past. Sydney, young and untested in moments like this, shifted nervously in her seat. She wanted to run from the heaviness, yet something inside told her she needed to witness this. Finally, Keanu lifted his head. His eyes met the man's, steady and unflinching. "You left when I needed you most," he said slowly, his voice calm but heavy with hurt. "Do you know what silence felt like then? It was not peace. It was emptiness. It was a silence that swallowed everything." The man lowered his gaze, shame written across his face. "I know," he whispered. "I thought leaving was easier than facing the truth. But the silence I carried after was louder than any words I could have spoken. I cannot change what I did, but I want to make peace." Keanu's jaw tightened. His silence now was not weakness, it was power. He let the man's words echo in the room before speaking again. "For years I learned to live without answers. I found strength in silence because I had no choice. But strength does not erase pain." Anna leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Sometimes the silence we run from is the silence we need to face. Maybe tonight is that moment." Sydney finally found her courage. She spoke carefully, her words trembling. "I never lived through what you both did. But I know how silence can feel like a wall. And walls keep people apart. Maybe it is time to let silence be a bridge instead." Her words surprised them all, even herself. Keanu turned to her, his expression softening. She had spoken the truth in a way only someone younger, untouched by bitterness, could. The man's eyes filled with tears. "I cannot erase the past," he said again, his voice cracking. "But I am here now, not to explain, not to justify, just to listen, if you let me." The silence that followed was different from before. It was heavy, yes, but it was also waiting. It was silence that asked for a choice. Keanu closed his eyes, letting it wash over him. He remembered nights of loneliness, days when he thought he would never forgive, and moments when silence had been his only friend. When he opened his eyes again, they were softer. "Listening is all I asked for back then," he said quietly. "You did not give it to me then. Maybe you can give it now." The man nodded, his shoulders trembling. "I will. I promise." Anna exhaled slowly, relief flowing through her. Sydney felt her heart swell, realizing she was witnessing something rare. The moment silence turned from a wound into the beginning of healing. But just as peace seemed within reach, the phone rang again. Its sudden sound shattered the fragile calm. Everyone froze. Keanu picked it up, and his eyes widened as he read the name. This time it was not from his past. It was someone else. Someone none of them expected. He looked at Anna and Sydney, his face pale. This call, it could change everything. The phone kept ringing, its sharp tone cutting through the room like a warning. Keanu held it in his hand, his eyes fixed on the screen, his lips pressed tightly together. Anna and Sydney leaned forward, waiting, their hearts racing. The man from Keanu's past stayed silent, his presence already fragile, now made heavier by the new tension. "Who is it?" Anna asked softly. Keanu did not answer right away. He let the phone ring until the sound felt unbearable. Finally, he whispered, "It's someone I thought would never call me. Someone who always stayed silent no matter what happened. Now suddenly they want to speak." "Then maybe you should hear them," Sydney said quickly, though her voice shook. "Maybe the silence is ending for a reason." Keanu hesitated. Every part of him wanted to stay in control, to keep the silence safe, but something inside urged him to answer. He pressed the button and placed the phone to his ear. "Keanu," a voice said on the other side, steady but broken, "I need your help." The room froze. Anna's hand tightened on the armrest. Sydney leaned forward, her breath shallow. The man from the past looked down, ashamed, almost afraid to listen. Keanu's eyes narrowed. "Why now?" he asked, his voice low. "After all this time, why break the silence today?" The voice on the phone trembled. "Because silence can no longer protect me. I am in trouble. I cannot face it alone." Keanu closed his eyes. The weight of choice pressed against him once again. He thought about how silence had healed, how it had hurt, and how it had now brought old ghosts back into his life. Anna stepped closer, her voice calm but firm. "Sometimes silence ends when someone has no other way. Maybe this is not about the past. Maybe this is about the present." Sydney nodded quickly. "And maybe about the future, too." Keanu opened his eyes again. "Where are you?" he asked into the phone. The voice gave an address, one that Keanu knew well. It was a small place on the edge of the city, quiet, hidden, a place people went when they wanted to disappear. "I'll come," Keanu said at last. "But know this, silence cannot cover lies anymore. If you want my help, you must speak the truth." The call ended. The room fell back into silence, but now it felt different again. It was no longer healing, no longer heavy with the past. It was a silence filled with urgency, a silence before a storm. Anna turned to him. "Are you sure you want to go?" Keanu nodded. "Silence can no longer protect me from what is coming. I have to face it." Sydney's voice trembled as she asked, "Can we come with you?" Keanu looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Yes. Maybe silence has brought us together for this reason." The man from Keanu's past stepped forward, his voice breaking. "Let me come, too. I may not deserve it, but maybe helping now can be my way of ending the silence between us." Keanu studied him carefully. Then he gave a small nod. "Then come. But know this. Truth will not wait for silence anymore." They left the room together, stepping into the night. The city lights flickered around them, the air cool and sharp. None of them spoke. They walked in silence, but this time it was not the silence of comfort or fear. It was the silence before revelation, the silence that comes when destiny is near. The streets grew darker as they walked toward the edge of the city. The lights of tall buildings faded behind them, replaced by dim lamps and quiet alleys. The silence between Keanu, Anna, Sydney, and the man from his past was heavy, but this time it carried purpose. Each of them felt the weight of what awaited, yet no one spoke. When they finally reached the address, they found a small, worn building with cracked walls and a flickering light above the entrance. The door stood slightly open, swaying with the wind. Keanu stepped forward first, his steps slow but steady. Anna followed close behind, her eyes alert. Sydney's heart pounded, but she forced herself not to fall back. The man trailed, guilt and fear chasing him with every step. Inside, the air was damp, carrying the smell of dust and something forgotten. The room was dim, shadows stretching across the walls. In the center sat a woman, her hands trembling, her eyes red from tears. She looked up as Keanu entered, and her voice broke. "Keanu," she whispered. "I did not know who else to call." Anna and Sydney exchanged a quick glance. They had never seen this woman before, but her face carried a story of pain. Keanu froze for a moment, then spoke softly. "Why now, after all this silence?" The woman lowered her head. "Because silence has become unbearable. I thought it would hide me. I thought it would protect me, but it only made me weaker. I am trapped in something I cannot escape." "What are you trapped in?" Keanu asked, his voice calm but sharp. Her hands shook as she answered. "A lie. One that has followed me for years. I stayed silent because I feared it would destroy me if I spoke. But now, if I do not speak, it will destroy me anyway." Sydney's breath caught in her throat. She had felt silence as a shield, but now she saw how it could also be a cage. She whispered almost to herself, "Silence can break us if we let it." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I need your help to face the truth," she said. "I cannot carry this alone anymore." Keanu stood still, his eyes searching hers. "Truth is heavy," he said slowly. "Heavier than silence. Once you speak it, there is no going back." Anna stepped closer, her voice steady. "But truth is also freedom. Silence binds, truth releases." The woman's hands gripped tightly together. She looked at all of them, then back at Keanu. "The truth is connected to you," she said. "To your past, and to him." She pointed at the man standing behind them. The air grew colder. Keanu turned sharply, his eyes narrowing at the man who had left him years ago. The man's face went pale, his lips trembling. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The woman closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "The silence you both carried is the same silence that destroyed me. I am here because what you lost, and what I lost, are not separate. They are the same story." The room fell silent again, but this silence was unlike any before. It was not healing, not comforting. It was sharp, trembling, filled with the shock of revelation. Anna's hand tightened against her chest. Sydney's eyes widened, her breath unsteady. Keanu stood frozen, every part of him pulled between past and present. The man lowered his head, unable to meet anyone's eyes. And then, the woman whispered the words that shattered everything. "The truth is, I was the reason he left you." The woman's words filled the room like thunder. "I was the reason he left you." Keanu's breath slowed, his chest tightening. He looked from the woman to the man who had betrayed him years ago. His silence was sharp, almost unbearable. Anna's hand gripped the edge of the table, her eyes locked on Keanu. Sydney leaned forward, her heart racing, afraid of what would follow. The man's lips trembled. "It's true," he whispered. "I wanted to stay. I wanted to be there for you. But she came to me. She begged me to walk away. She said your silence would heal faster if I wasn't there. I believed her. I was weak. I let silence decide for me. Keanu's eyes darkened, but he did not speak. He simply stared at them, the years of pain swirling behind his gaze. The woman shook her head, tears running down her face. I thought I was protecting you, she said. I thought silence would spare you more pain. I was wrong. I created a silence that wounded you both, and I have carried that guilt every day. The room grew colder. The silence stretched long, pressing on all of them. Anna's voice finally broke through, calm yet firm. You cannot change the past, but silence has kept this wound open. The only way forward is truth, spoken and accepted. Sydney's voice was soft but steady. You cannot undo silence with more silence, only with courage. Keanu finally closed his eyes. He let the silence wash over him one last time, and in that silence, he felt the truth. He had lived through emptiness, built strength from quiet, and learned how silence could both heal and hurt. But now he understood. Silence had done its part. It was time for words. He opened his eyes, his voice low but steady. You both hurt me. You both chose silence instead of truth, and I lived in the shadows of that choice. But today, I will not let silence decide anymore. I forgive you. Anna's eyes filled with tears. Sydney's hands trembled as she pressed them together. The man looked at Keanu in disbelief, his own tears falling. You forgive me? Keanu nodded. Forgiveness is not for you. It is for me. I will not let silence chain me anymore. Forgiveness is how I set myself free. The woman covered her face with her hands, sobbing quietly. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not, Keanu replied gently. But forgiveness is not about what you deserve. It is about what I choose, and I choose peace. The silence that followed was no longer heavy. It was light, like the quiet of a morning before the sun rises. For the first time, the silence carried no fear, no guilt, no pain. It carried release. Anna reached out and held Keanu's hand. You turned silence into strength, she said. Sydney added softly, and now into inspiration. The man dropped to his knees, overwhelmed. Thank you, he whispered. You have given me a chance I never thought I would have. Keanu helped him up, his expression calm. Do not waste it. Live differently. Let silence guide you, but never let it control you again. The woman wiped her tears, her voice trembling. Perhaps my silence can finally end tonight. They all stood together in the quiet room. The night outside was still, but the silence inside was different now. It was not an emptiness. It was a promise, a reminder that silence, when faced with truth and forgiveness, could turn into something greater. They left the building together, stepping into the cool night air. The city lights glowed softly, and the world seemed quiet, but alive. Keanu, Anna, and Sydney walked side by side, the man and the woman a step behind. None of them spoke, but this time the silence carried no pain. It carried peace.